I'm Megan. I'm a mum of one who is 2 years old now, and she is absolutely gorgeous. And I struggled a lot with anxiety and depression after I had her. She was about 3 months old. I noticed that things weren't quite right probably not long after having her, but I was really determined to push it down, ignore it, pretend that everything was okay, hope that it would go away on its own and I wouldn't have to acknowledge it. I didn't even want to be a mum. When I'd had her, I had been really intent on breastfeeding and I couldn't, for various reasons. I just could not make breastfeeding work for me, and the guilt of that was horrendous and it was all consuming, and I felt like I'd failed, because I felt like I had failed to have the birth that I wanted, because it was a 30-hour labour. Everything that could go wrong did, and then I couldn't breastfeed either, and it just felt like I was falling at every hurdle. So yeah, it was all consuming, and I just became more and more depressed as time went on. I never really reached out for support because I was so intent on pretending that nothing was wrong. And by the time that everyone else was really aware that things were wrong and there was no hiding it anymore, and they were trying to make me get help, I no longer wanted the help because I was so far gone. I was so ill. I didn't want to be alive. So I didn't want the help that was being offered to me, and it became a bit of a vicious circle for a few weeks where I would be walking out the house and disappearing, and the police would end up intervening. I'd be taken up to A&E. I'd sit in A&E for hours at a time, up to 24 hours on one occasion. And often the whole time I was sitting in A&E, I wouldn't have a bed. I'd be sat in a chair, so I wouldn't get any sleep. I wouldn't get any food. I wouldn't even be offered a cup of water. And so my mood would just worsen the whole time I was sitting in A&E, but then I would lie through my teeth to the doctor and the approved social worker who would come and assess me, because I didn't want to be an inpatient. I would say I wanted to go home, but I didn't. I wanted to end things. So yeah, I would lie to try and get away from everyone. Eventually, people kind of caught on that I was lying and that I was just going to leave hospital and repeat the cycle over again. So I was detained and taken up to a psychiatric unit. And I was only in there for the weekend, but it was kind of enough time for me to cool off a bit. I still wasn't well, but it took that kind of urgency to end things out of it all. Social services intervened around that time. Well, actually, no, I called social services right at the start of it all. I called them and I told them that I didn't want to be a mum, and I asked them to come and get my daughter and take her away. That I wasn't the best mum that I could be for her. She deserved better than me. And that led to a kind of child protection intervention scenario. So we had a meeting, and she was put on the child protection register, and that was really difficult because it felt like I was sitting there telling myself that I was a bad mum, and then I was sitting at a table surrounded by strangers who were all just cementing that belief, telling me that I was abusive and neglectful. Yeah, it just made everything so much harder. I was placed with the home treatment team once I was discharged, but they were only around for I think 2 weeks. I was then passed over to a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist, I've never even met her. I spoke to her once on the phone, and that was a year after I was passed over to her. I was told at the time that I was being referred for DBT and CBT, and she called me a year later after I'd been passed over to her to tell me that no referrals were ever made because the waiting list for DBT was full, so they just thought they wouldn't refer me for anything. And at the time when I'd been passed over to her, I was told that the waiting list for DBT was 2 years. So a year after that, I thought I was halfway through the waiting list. I was really convinced I was doing really well. And then it was in the middle of the first COVID lockdown that she dropped that bombshell and just left me with it. And I didn't hear from her again until, well, I never heard from her again. I had to get re-referred this year to even ask for extra help because I needed medication. I wasn't doing well. I had been coping, but I think the fact that I knew that this year should have been the year that I should have been getting that help finally, that therapy that I had needed for so long, it kind of came crashing down on me, and I was just kind of like, no, I'm no further forward. So I think I panicked a bit. I definitely did not get the help that I needed, which unfortunately has been my story for about 10 years, that I've been struggling with mental health issues. So something needs to change. So when I was admitted to the inpatient unit, it was just a standard inpatient unit, and I was the only one there with perinatal mental health issues. And obviously you end up interacting with other patients, but there was no way really for me to relate with them, which did not help with the whole feeling alone thing, because you do feel isolated. You do feel like you're the only person in the world going through any of it. And it would have been nice just to have that kind of peer support and knowing that I wasn't the only one and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. All those cliches, that you can get through it. It would have been nice to kind of have that example in front of me instead of just being surrounded by people on totally different walks of life who, yes, were also struggling, but not in the same ways. I mean, I was breaking my heart the entire time. I was sobbing because I didn't want to let my daughter go, but I also didn't want to be a mum, and that conflicting feeling, those really conflicting thoughts were just hellish. I think the only things that really worked for me is I started volunteering with Pangs, and that really helped, because it kind of gave me a bit of purpose. Much later on I started taking on new hobbies, so crochet, open water swimming, anything like that. The crochet, it keeps my hands busy. The open water swimming, the shock of the cold is kind of like hitting the reset button on my mind, so it just allows me to hit pause on everything. I can just forget anything outside of the water and just be calm for 10-20 minutes, maybe, if I'm lucky. And yeah, it helps. I would tell the decision makers that it's all very well to tell us that help is coming, but we need it now. In fact, we needed it years ago. And half measures don't work, and they won't save any money if that's what they're concerned about. We need that specialist support, because if you've got a mum with attachment issues who needs inpatient care, then separating her from her baby isn't going to help matters. Conversely, if you've got a mum who doesn't have attachment issues but needs inpatient care, you're just adding to the distress by separating her from a baby. So a mother and baby unit is absolutely essential, because it would have made so much difference to me and my story. 2 years on, I still struggle with attachment and bonding. I absolutely adore my daughter, but a mother and baby unit would have given me a fighting chance at getting out ahead of that. So it's all very well to sit there and say there isn't the demand for it. I'm here and I'm demanding it, because it really would have made the difference for me. Don't give up. There is a way out. It's not always going to be like this, and it does sound cliche, but I do have great days with my daughter. We laugh, we have fun. I never thought I would laugh again, to be quite honest. And we laugh, we have fun, we have great times together. And I can't believe that I almost lost the opportunity to watch her grow. That I tried to throw that opportunity away, because it has been, while it has been one of the hardest things that I have ever done, it's also been one of the best. I think if I had had some continuity of care, when I was seeing mental health professionals, and if promises had been fulfilled in relation to my care, if I had received the help that I was promised, or at least being kept in the loop as to what was happening, instead of being told repeatedly by several different people that these referrals were being made, only to be told much later on that they had never been made, then I maybe would have had a fighting chance at getting on top of things much sooner, instead of this kind of cycling behaviour that went on, where I thought I was fine and then I wasn't, and I thought it was okay again and I wasn't. And it really has been a bit of a roller coaster, and I'm still on it. But I think if promises could just be fulfilled, if I could be involved in my own care, in decisions about it, then that would be huge. And if someone took the time to listen, because the police were really, really heavily involved when I was having the breakdown. And honestly, they were probably more helpful than any of the health staff that I came across, because once they were with me and sitting with me in hospital, they couldn't go anywhere else. They had no one else to deal with. So they took the time to sit and talk to me and listen to me and give me the space to open up in my own time. And that was so valuable. Whereas the health staff almost seemed to forget I was there until they needed the chair or the cubicle for someone else. And then it was just kind of usher me off to the next free space to wait for someone to come and deal with me, sort of thing. So yeah, I think communication and taking the time to listen would have been huge. Life is still very chaotic for me. I still have massive ups and downs, and after resisting medication for years, I am finally on antidepressants. I'd resisted them because of negative experiences in the past, but I have finally found some that I am cautiously optimistic work for me. So that's one thing that I would say, is to stick with it. You don't always find the right one first time or second time around. But life for me, while it's chaotic and while I still have these ups and downs, I don't go nearly as low as I once did. And, upsets feel manageable. It used to be that everything felt like the end of the world. Child woke up crying in the middle of the night. Oh, no. I could not deal with it, even though that's kind of part and parcel of having a baby. Everyday things would just be so detrimental to my mental health. But now, it all just feels more manageable.